All righty, I want to welcome everyone to this very special project recipe event featuring Simon Davies with Playing for Ancestors, all about a special project that he's put together. We're delighted today to have a group from around the world, as we've been chatting before the call began, from as far away as the northern tip of Scotland to the western edge of Australia, and I'm here in the west coast of California. And it's just a delight to have all of you. Simon chiming in from England, outside of London, as I recall, but I'll let you go into all of that. The way we run these calls, I try to keep it to a very tight 1 hour. And then after the hour, you are welcome to stay. I will turn off the recording, but you're welcome to stay for what we often call a little after party. I do have a few little introductory remarks. Most importantly is, of course, to welcome Simon. Simon is a founder of a fabulous archive software called WeAre.xyz. And if you aren't familiar with it, check it out. It's been quite an interesting addition to the family history and genealogy community, and become quite well known now in the UK. I do have a tight policy here, by the way. I do not support any sponsorships or any kind of affiliates or anything like that. And all opinions expressed here are just personal opinions. And I think that's kind of important to ensure the freedom to say what we want to say, and then you can trust the sincerity and with which it's expressed. This particular program is fun because it's really focusing in on, I think, a real key for all family historians and genealogists, which is how can I get everybody else excited as I am about what we're doing? And in particular, the next generation's excited, because they're the people we're doing this for. How do we get them excited? So this is the first of 3 programs we'll have in a row focused on getting kids excited about it. This one, of course, talking about playing cards, pulling together playing cards, which goes across generations and a new way to tell stories. Next week, Thursday, we have a program featuring Anna Schutz, who is a longtime member here, talking about a scavenger hunt for kids focused on family history stories. And I just posted a new program for January featuring Cindy Terrien, who will be talking about some of the special programs she's put together in a whole book of fun, genealogy fun for kids. So stay tuned for that one as well. And with that as a brief introduction, we'll go ahead and begin the program, and I will defer to Simon Davies. Thank you again so much for coming, Simon.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Barbara. It's a pleasure to be here at the center of all of you from the west coast of California. I'm glad you didn't say east coast of California, because that would have confused me. down to Australia. And Jenny, that's brilliant that you're up at 2 in the morning. Right, I'm just going to try and work the technology and share a screen. Let's see if that works. I'm not totally fluent with
Should have no
Meets,
problem.
but I feel I can do it. Is that? Can you see yourselves now? Is that?
We can see it. Yep.
What's happening?
Yep. It's all good. You will want to take your Google Meet and hide it.
Yeah,
there you go.
I've moved you up there. You're up there.
Yep. We're up here.
And look, so here we go. I'm going to kick off with some slides. The first was a bit of fun. So I jumped in. I wanted a cover slide. So of course I had to go to AI. And I was hunting around on ghosts playing cards and all sorts of things. But eventually came up with this rather fabulous image. So I'm going to take you through a little project that I've done. But first of all, I'll just say a little bit about myself. I know some of you, which is great. My sort of background is I love family history. I'm on the committee of the Shropshire Family History Society, which is one of my ancestral heartlands. My parents grew up there, and I go on. I know most of the graveyards inside out by now. It's a wonderful part of the world that I enjoy. So I made a beeline for that society when they wanted committee members. I'm a tech entrepreneur guy, I guess. You'll see something of the archive platform that we've built, WeAre.xyz. But prior to that, I worked in mobile technology, making a making a platform to get feature phones in emerging markets like India and Indonesia to run smartphone apps, which was really interesting and quite humbling experience, actually. So I spent a lot of time out in those areas getting them onto the internet, really. Great, interesting times of travel. And then I'm a very keen naturalist. And those of you who obviously know what that butterfly is there, it is a Gulf fritillary, which I spotted near where my brother and sister-in-law live in North Texas. My wife is from Texas. But we found that we have ancestors who live 20 miles apart in Herefordshire, England. And the bottom right there are her ancestors who came over from that part of the world, and they moved to Kansas, and that's their original place they had in sort of 1880, this grainy photograph, or there that sort of time. And we found a link. Even though I went all the way to Texas to find a wife, turns out we were actually related. So I didn't really, I was trying to deepen the gene pool, but I failed miserably. Okay, so I had a plan. I love this idea, and Barbara massively encouraged me to, you'll see where this originated from in terms of, there was an original idea before this, but Barbara mentioned, like, well, you do something with playing cards, and I thought, yeah, this is great, so we've got to go for it. So I thought, could we get images from my family history generally, but these are all specifically within my archive. So I have items within my archive. Could I put images onto playing cards and then put a QR code link on them, such that when you're playing cards or just looking at them generally, you could get your mobile phone out, hold it in front of it, and then poof, go and open up and find out more about what was in front of you. And that's what we set out to do. And I also wanted to get it done in time for Christmas, so they would be wrapped. And I'm pleased to say, I hope you can see all this, because I can't see myself anywhere, but here they are. They're actually here, these lovely little cards. Can you see that, Barbara? Is that showing up?
Yes, yes, it's perfect.
Great. I have no visibility of people in this mode, but that's fine. So there they are all strewn out on the table, and I'm pleased to say, or not pleased to say, it's not as simple as it looks. So let's have a look. But first, actually, there's a pack of cards that predates this, and this is what inspired Barbara to suggest I try again with some regular playing cards. So what I actually made to begin with was a set of these fellas here. So I'm using ancestral pictures, but there's no QR code on that side. There's just one on the back that takes you to the archive in general. And this was, I was basically recreating a Victorian parlor game called Happy Families. And in that, you'd have four members of the family, the father, the mother, and then a son and a daughter. And this game dates from 1851. It was made in time for the Great Exhibition, which was the big show in Britain that Prince Albert set up with the Crystal Palace in Hyde Park. And they had these families, so Mr. Chip the Carpenter, you got Master Chip the Carpenter's son. And so I made these cards, which was great fun, but they're a bit too novelty. So you look at them, but it's not a game you play that often, and it was just a bit too much of an effort. And so that's why when Barbara suggested going for it with actual playing cards, it was much more appealing. But given that we're all family historians and generally get interested in bits of history and trivia, I'm actually going to take a little detour here. I'm going to tell you about that company there, John Jack Jr. It started in 1795, Thomas Jack, and they made games and toys, and they're still going today. And they have one claim of fame that I couldn't resist throwing in here. It's a complete tangential, so forgive me. They manufactured what was called the Staunton chess set. Staunton in the 1850s was the world premier chess player, and somebody came up with a design of chess pieces and patented it. And Jacques of London became the manufacturers of it. And during the Second World War, MI9, one of our secret services, used it to smuggle supplies into prisoners of war, both British and American. And they would, I've put the details here, but the chess piece is hollowed out. And they put things in it, but really cleverly, they made the thread reverse, so that if somebody was trying to undo it, they would actually make it tighter. I find it incredible that frankly, the guards just said, "Oh yes, here's a chess set, off you go." But it's on Wikipedia, so it must be true. Anyway, that was my little detour, which I thought was a bit of fun. But back to the cards. Okay, so the second attempt, let's have a go with standard playing cards. Clearly, they're much more likely to be used. We use cards for all sorts of games, and so it stands a much greater chance of allowing the things within your family history to catch the eye and various relatives to have a go with it and take an interest. And you can reveal a lot more, of course. You've got 52 playing cards, as opposed to the smaller sets of families that you get in the other game. And here I've made 2 packs, one with a different back. And so if you have friends or if you play bridge, you can make a bridge set. And my parents love playing bridge, so I've made a bridge set for them. And I really like the idea that, because they play bridge very informally with friends in the village they live in. And I love the idea. I can just imagine some of the friends that I've met just being really sort of curious about what's on these cards, and you can see a conversation starting around those items, which rather tickles me. In fact, I'll show you the packaging I've made for them as well at the end. So what will you need? Well, 52 images. I chickened out jokers, but you can do jokers as well if you want. And you can link to anything. So, I mean, in my archive, I have people, places, documents, photo albums, sections on various heirlooms, just photos in their own right. So you can link to anything. You just need to find 52 images and think about the spread of what you want to cover. And I'll come back to that in a minute, because that's very important. You may need a blank playing card template. Although some services provide you with the basics, like the suit and the number of the card, I dispense with that for various reasons I'll come to later. So my design, I had to build in the number and the suit into the design to give me maximum control. So I'll go into that as well. You clearly need a back of card design. I mean, I made a theme on our branding for the archive business, but think of something, and generally they tend to be sort of wallpapery type patterns, don't they? So see what you can come up with there. Then you want image creation editing software. I mean, breaking ground, I suppose. I probably did a rather laboured process with a full-on sort of Photoshop type thing, but been talking to Barbara since, and Canva clearly is a much more accessible way of doing this. And then you need QRs, codes, of course, and I spent quite a bit of time looking around QR codes to find. I only found one that really did the job in terms of price point and flexibility. So I'll explain that. And then you need a card fulfillment service, somebody to actually make them. Okay, so most important decision. So who are they for? The reason this is so important, of course, is because you can take facets from your family history, and these are my ancestors on my paternal side on the left and my maternal side on the right. And depending on who you're giving them to, some items in your family history may be relevant or completely irrelevant. So I can make a set for my parents, and I can pull from across this whole range. And in fact, the initial sets I've made are for my parents and my brother, but they're not really so good for cousins. So for cousins, I'd have to steer either to the left or to the right. And it doesn't bring in my wife, for example. So if I wanted to make a pack for my kids, I could draw in on my wife's ancestry as well. So you just need to think carefully about who you're going to be making them for when it comes to choosing which pool of images you draw from. You need a card fulfillment service. So there's the service I've used is called makeplayingcards.com. It's very flexible. I can actually start with complete blanks, as you can see here. Whereas I think there are others which start with a sort of playing card template. I personally didn't find anything else that was particularly easy to manipulate, but I'd used this for the Happy Families project, so I was familiar with this and I went back to it. And just to give some order of magnitude of what we're looking at here, I ordered 6 packs. They're probably $120, $150, but I did go for the express delivery. I really wanted them back in time for this presentation, and it was easily a good £20, so $30, $40 on that. So that would cut quite a bit of cost. The delivery, I think, was probably 2 weeks. But interestingly, the first thing that was, they came back and challenged me on copyright. So I have all these images of my ancestors, and there's one which is a newspaper article from 1850 that shows, and they said that they weren't satisfied that I wasn't covering celebrity and celebrity news. After 2 emails, I had to actually give them a letter signed by me saying that these were my ancestors. It was nothing to do with celebrity news. And then they pressed the button on the process, which was altogether very bizarre. Within the making playing cards options, this is what I mean about, you can either go for one that has the suit and the number or letter here on the card, as you can see in the middle, but that restricts you to just adding the design in that red rectangle area. So I went for the one on the left because I wanted the QR code nicely distanced away from the image, not interfering with letters and so on. But I think some people could easily opt for probably a more straightforward thing to execute, which is the one in the middle. And then I've gone for bridge size cards. You can have poker sized cards, a whole range of options on sizing. That's the card fulfillment service. Now, because I was starting with blanks and actually putting the suits on, etc., as I mentioned, I needed to find a template for that. So I went to Shutterstock, where I just signed up for a free trial, downloaded this, and then I put this into my. It's called Pixel Maker Pro. It's sort of a poor man's Photoshop, but the same sort of functionality. And I literally then broke these up and used them as the backdrop to then layer images on. So the thing that I found specifically tricky, which may no longer be tricky because Barbara has a knack of getting to the bottom of these things and found something that I hadn't noticed. But what I want to point out here is, because of the whole print thing about having bleeding edges and getting things to fit within the card size, I had to play around quite a lot before I found the actual upload dimensions. So the man standing there on the left, that image on the left, that's the actual size that I uploaded that then produced the man on to his right, which doesn't look sensible. I couldn't see rhyme or reason to it, and I kept having to juggle around and jiggle. But Barbara pointed out that I didn't find this, but there's this card template here where that blue area, they're saying that's the area that you want to make your card to. I mean, I would still then need to experiment to see that the king and the heart symbol did appear as they do, as I've managed to get them to do so. But that was the most fiddly area, to be honest. By the way, that's my great grandfather. He was an amateur wrestler, and that's him looking rather fine in about 1899. Right. Okay, so this is the complicated way of assembling your cards. So I'm using this this application called Pixel Maker Pro that I mentioned, and it's a layering photographic image manipulation tool. So you'll see on the left here, see where it says Queen. Those are all the constituent layers that I've built up. Now, the thing that had the most anxiety about, and probably was a bit over attentive to, was how to make sure that those rectangles in the middle with the image and the words on were just exactly centered. And I came up with all sorts of Heath Robinson ways of doing that. You can see on the right, I've made these transparent rectangles that I could put in and just test that all the dimensions were correctly apportioned. And that, I have to say, I think I probably overindulged on that level of detail, and that took quite a long time. And certainly, if you were to use the template where you already had the card numbers in there, that wouldn't be a problem for you. Okay, so on to these rather cute little things. I think it's great that QR codes have come to the fore. I remember when they came out a decade or so ago, and they seem to be dying a death, but I think they're brilliant. You need 52 individual QR codes, which is quite a lot. And the thing I found in common with most site services like Bitly, and I forget the others now, they were really expensive for that many barcodes. And this was the only one, and I think they had a threshold of 100 in the basic level, where you could actually do a whole 100 for a reasonable amount, in this case $12 a month, and then you can basically you actually can do all sorts of fancy things with the designs. You get logos in there. There's lots of options. You can play with the color schemes as I've done here. I decided that I wanted to strike a balance between them being obviously there, so you might engage with it, but also not distract from the card when you're in card play mode. So for the the diamonds and the hearts, I went with a more reddish color scheme, and obviously the opposite with the clubs and the spades. Now, the crucial thing that I believe is going to happen, I ordered it for a month, paid my $12, and immediately cancelled it, so that on the 9th of December, my account cancels. Now, reading all the small print, everything I can see, they should continue to work. It's just I can't go in and change the URL destination, and I can't go in and look at the analytics, which tells me how many people have clicked it and where they are in the world and that sort of thing that really I'm not that interested in. So theoretically, that is then a really economic way of pulling together those QR codes. And we'll put a note up after the 9th if it doesn't work, but I'm pretty sure certainly it will. I looked into it quite seriously. Okay, so out of all that, you should have ended up placing an order. You're almost in a position to make an order, but the thing you'll want back here, of course, is these QR codes. So you actually need to find what it is we want to link to, get the code, sorry, the URL, and put it into that QR code. And clearly it makes sense to name each QR code in relation to the actual thing the card that it represents. Otherwise it could be a complete nightmare. And so what could you link it to? So obviously I'm going to talk about linking it to my archive, but actually, of course, you could link it to anything that has a URL. So if you have a blog, you can link it to a load of blog posts. If you have a YouTube collection, if you've got Google Photos, you might have a WordPress site. You could even link it to a Wikipedia page. I've developed my family archive and WeAre.xyz, which means I do have all these unique URLs that should stand the test of time. So that's the key thing. Can you guarantee that there'll be some longevity to those URLs? But there are a whole range of things where online and URLs where you probably have information that you could link through to them. So I've linked it to my WeAre.xyz archive. There's just some random things flying around just to make a colorful screen, but we have maps and places and objects and original documents and all sorts, and that was my smorgasbord of stuff to dive into and link up. And here they are. So these are from the submissions that were made, the actual graphics out of that Pixelmator Pro. And the way I portioned them, the spades were for the pools, and I have a lot of information on the pools thanks to various artifacts they've left. So they took up quite a bit of this demo page, but they were easy to dive into and get to grips with. In the middle there, the hearts, that's my mother's side, the Walmsleys, the Peters and the Rileys and the Ariels. The clubs, that's the Davises, so that's me. Plenty of stuff to go on there. And then on the right, that's actually a hodgepodge of, the diamonds, a hodgepodge of people beyond the Davises. So still in one area of the family, you basically had Joneses and Hugheses and people. I decided to put them into diamonds. I always had a respectable looking chap to be the king, and then the jack. The jack would be someone special, a young man who, and I'll show you this guy here who died in the war. And then the queen was queen, and then aces. I decided to be a bit enigmatic. I wouldn't put any words on there, just something profound and poignant. And this, so I've put the links on these. So I'll now show you what happens. Imagine you've got your camera, and I mean, if you hold it up to the screen now, those little QR codes, they actually work. The camera locks onto them, puts an address button up, you press it, and on your phone you open up and find out more about them. So this is my great-great-grandfather, whose grave I discovered about a month ago. Now, my great-great-grandfather is this guy, Thomas Poole, on the right. And Thomas, in fact, I'll start here. So Thomas Poole wrote a diary. that my father handed to me, and so I feel I know him very well. So if I was to scan that QR code and click, oh, it's gone to the screen above. So that click has taken me to Thomas Poole's page. Well, it's actually taken to his diary in my archive, and here is what he left. And my father, during COVID, handed it to me, and half the book is actually his farm accounts. So on one level, they're quite dull, but actually they're fabulous to read. Just watching the handwriting and just getting a sense of the flow of the farm and the bushels of this, and it's brilliant. And so I managed to read right through almost 50 years of farm accounts, which was just as well I did, because in the middle, it turned out he'd left this note: being kept in the house under the doctor with influenza. I've copied out in this book some of the events that concern me and my family in a quick farmer's life, also the years and dates of them, as some descendant in years to come may look them over. And that's me 125 years later. So I've been through and transcribed everything that he wrote. And as a result, I've been on holiday with him. At the end of every harvest, he goes down to the Gower Peninsula in Wales and goes on a walking holiday, and I've explored that. And anyway, I feel like I know him really well. And so it was with some poignancy that I found his grave. So I'll click here, and what this is going to the gallery. This is the church it's in, and I've made a gallery, or I've uploaded a load of images from that visit. And I found him. He's there in this image here. He's that guy there. And it was all a bit grown over, and I pulled out all the grass. Here we go. I pulled all the grass away because his wife, Margaret, my great-great-grandmother, she disappeared below the grass line, and I pulled it all out. Like, I had cuts all over my hands, and nettles. It was, I was making a point. I was determined to, and I scrubbed every face. You can't really tell, but it had a lot of green lichens on it. And I sort of gave it a little pat and put my arm around it, and got to know him and had a little chat with him, and just imagined actually my grandmother, little girl, would have been at his funeral. That's my grandmother, his grandchild, who died. She was born in 1897. Anyway, and I had a look around this absolutely fabulous little church. It's just a real gem, it really is. I'm just going to go over that. So that's great-great-grandfather. Now this one here, just in terms of giving ideas for what you can link into. So this is going to go to an article I've written about our supposed Irish roots. My mother loves the idea that we're Irish. She so wants to be Irish, and the evidence. It's hard to really pinpoint where we are from in Ireland. So this is actually a piece which is about my research into getting as close as I can to getting us to Ireland. And basically, I've got us almost all the way from this guy, John Riley, upwards. They're all born in Ireland. That's my great-grandfather, the one who was in the wrestling gear. That's my grandmother. And then these are hidden. These are hidden, by the way, because they're alive. So we're looking at public links, so you can't see them. But I can see them on my private view. So this is really for my mother. I've taken her on a journey of evidence that I used to go back in time. And I started with that wrestling guy's father. I've got that he was married. I've got that he was born, and that his father, John, was dead. So his father clearly died before he was born. That gives me an approximation of when he was alive, etc. And it's just loads of evidence. And then we get these census records from Manchester that were damaged in the flood, but fortunately they were really good at they obviously read it and then wrote down the notes, which was the real link that needed to be made. And gradually, bit by bit, we find someone in Ireland who fits some of these people and their dates, and we get back to Ireland, and we come up with a theory for who the Irish family might have been, where they lived. So and then there's all sorts of links to do my notes afterwards. So it's not just about presenting total fact. Here I'm imparting the breadcrumbs for whoever wants to take interest and pick it up. I mean, I'll probably come back to it at some point as well, but it's not just about getting down total fact. It's about leaving the sense of fascination as much as anything for me anyway. What else we got here? So I bring it closer to home. This is my dad. My grandfather was a great color slide merchant, as it were. He loved photograph. And this is my dad. It's summer holiday in 1958. This great camping. Corfe Castle in Dorset. I just love these old. You can imagine the material, that really heavy. I can't remember what you call it, but you know the stuff they used to make rucksacks out of. And that I love this picture. Look at those. Look at those haystacks. They're just works of art down there. They're making a thatched roof out of the hay to weatherproof them. Before really putting plastics and stuff on them. It's wonderful. So that's my dad on the right there, my aunt, uncle, my grandmother. So that's a link into an album. What else we got here? Oh, this is a sad one. So this is just a photo. So this is a lady in Canada. Her parents emigrated to Canada late 1800s. Because farming was pretty hard graft on the Welsh border in those days, farming generally. She made it to the sort of Vancouver, Victoria, west coast of Canada. She married, so in about, I forget the year, but she married this a guy called somebody Mesher. He died within a year. She then married his brother a year or two later. He then died within another year. So she married these two brothers and they both died. And then about 10 years later, she married somebody else, this guy, I can't remember his name, Larson or something. And then she commits suicide by drinking carbolic acid. Just incredible. Just this poor soul. Anyway, so that's one to make people think. And all the men around her, I think, had all been up the Klondike as well. There was a relation into the whole gold rush thing as well at some point. What else have we got here? So we have to have a look at this guy here. So this I'm going to go down here to George Davies. So he's one of the main focuses of my research recently. He is my grandfather's cousin, and he fought in the Battle of Messines. And because I'd always thought that I could never find anyone who had any links in my past to the First World War until I got to my grandfather's cousins, and then it became a different story. So it brings him much closer by thinking of him as my grandfather's cousin. You know, they would have been children growing up together, would have known each other. In fact, his brother, who died of Spanish flu, so this guy is going to die at Messines in 1917. His elder brother, his next brother is going to die in 1918 near Haifa as part of the Egyptian expeditionary force trying to get to Damascus. And then his younger brother is going to die of Spanish flu in 1918 as well. And his younger brother was called Brian with a Y, and my dad's called Brian with a Y. And we can't find any other Brians. And I like to think that that's my grandfather remembering this poor young cousin of his that he would have known up to the age of 18. Anyway, this guy here. So I have to show this for Jenny in Australia, because there's an Australian link here, and Jenny's made the great effort to stay up at 2:30 in the morning. So this guy, he was very devout. He became a missionary, a Methodist missionary. He grew up on this wonderful, beautiful farm in Shropshire near Much Wenlock. Although ironically, I discovered that his parents they conceived out of wedlock, and they went to Aberystwyth on the coast to have a shotgun wedding. It's rather unfair on our ancestors that they can't hide from the records now they're all digitized. Anyway, this guy, he goes to Australia as a missionary. He then enlists. He comes back and he fights the Australian Imperial Force, and he dies at Messines. But I have here, that's the boat he went out on. That's the boat he came back on. That's where he trained near Stonehenge, and then he goes to war. But he left a diary, and the Australian War Memorial Library in Canberra, they digitized it for me and they sent it to me, and it really brought him even more to life. So here this is 1916 on the Western Front. He reminisces in his diary about his childhood in that farm, that lovely farm he saw. He talks about his father being Father Christmas and coming in with a sack, and and so it just brings him more. So I brought him more and more to life, and also because I projected into them this lovely nuclear family and this nice farmyard, fireside, hearth environment, and this just like sort of affirms it, and you can see what they had these lovely warm Christmases, and he's reflecting on it while sitting on the Western Front. And this article basically he takes him across the Channel. He then goes up to this place, Armentières, which you can see this is actually during the war, bombed or just after the war. He gets in. He describes going into the trenches and all these things like parados and fire bays. He mentions them in his diary, and so I used that to explain what they were. And here's the trench line, and etc. That was his arena of battle. That is those are the German. So Messines, there was a great offensive where they detonated 19 mines that were 80 feet underground that they'd been digging away for 6 months to a year to put there. And they say that they killed 10,000 soldiers instantly. And the general there at the time said, tomorrow we may not change history, but we will certainly change geography. And those, I can't remember if I've gone past them, but somewhere I got picked there here. So that's a mine that's been blown up, and here's 2 mine holes today. They have lakes in there, and you can go and visit them. But anyway, his diary builds to a crescendo. We approached the war. He talks about seeing these Taubes, which are these planes on the left. That's the actual battlefield. And then he talks about an incident with this observation balloon, where this enemy fighter comes over, fighting. You can see a crack, 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 crack. This little German plane is firing at this observation balloon, and the guy just jumps out. He describes it. He says that the observers said, just jump out, and you can see why, because they were tethered. They had a parachute, and they came down. And then he talks about how basically the guy's drifting towards enemy lines. That's the Messines battlefield aerial photo afterwards. So I'm dwelling on this a lot, but I just find it absolutely gobsmacking. I really do. Anyway, so that's him. I'll just flick through a couple more. This is my great grandfather, John Jones. I've been doing pieces on him recently. He was a farmer on the Welsh border. I sent my drone up to Kevin the drone, and I'll tell you about Kevin the drone. He took a little flight over the village of Llandussel in Montgomeryshire, and we're looking at that field on the tithe maps. Those match up. Those were where he farmed, and his son started farming at this place here until he found it too hard and went to Canada, and it was his daughter that drank carbolic acid. Anyway, this was John Jones's house. Sadly, it got pulled down in 1970, but that's the site from above. It's actually the owner sent me a drone of it, but he showed me around. We found a wall. There's a bit of wall left, and there's you can see that's the tithe map on the left, and the footprint of his land. And he passed away quite comfortably, really. There's a newspaper article, 1878. He had a nice breakfast. I can imagine someone writing an article about someone dying, saying, well, yeah, he ate a hearty breakfast. He was feeling rather unwell, and he went to his study, where shortly afterwards he was found dead. Journalists really earned keep in those days, didn't they? And that's the church. They were Wesleyan, so that was their chapel, and they're buried in the grounds of that church, which is a lovely little churchyard, because that place was pulled down, and just the doorway exists, but the graveyard is there. Trefnelly Bank. Trefnelly Bank. Trefnelly Bank. Kevin the drone went to have a look at Trefnelly Bank. I have a pocket book, which is of ancestral research by Geoffrey Poole in 1833, and he talks about this place Trefnelly Bank, which was a farm that his family had. And I found it, and we went to have a look around it. And, in fact, there's the pocketbook reference to it. And what I've done here is I've embedded a video, where we sent Kevin the drone up to have a look. So we started. There's a churchyard at the end of the drive to the farm, and they're all buried in there. So we went and found all their graves, and then we sent Kevin up from the graveyard, and then I'm just fast forwarding. You can see my bald head down there, and then he sets off. There's a little bit of stuff I've used iMovie to stick in there, details about the graves you can find. There's the map from the Montgomeryshire Genealogical Society, which helped us find the graves, and then he sets off. and he's going to go to, that is Trefnelly Bank there, very ramshackle old farm that they took over in 1756. And there it is. The family welcomed us in. We had a good look round. And that's looking over to the River Severn, which was in full flood. And all these fields down here, they're on the original tithe map. All those borders you can see. Let's come out of that. Just you can see down here. That's the tithe map. There's Trefnelly Bank in the middle. There. And Kevin flew over, and there's the chapel. The graveyard's there. So he flew up here, and then we sent him up around here, and just had a real sense of where your ancestors were roaming around. And that is my dad, me, and my son, and that is my 4 times great grandfather's grave that we had to scrape away to find it. Actually, behind us there is his brother. But you've got how many generations, I can't think, hovering around that grave. And I think I put it here. He's that guy there. It's his grave. That's my grandmother. That's way back in time. And this is the guy, Thomas Paul, whose diary I had, the one whose grave the other grave I went to see. So it's his grandfather. I love the link. So that's not my grandmother. She's then the link to my great-great-grandfather, who I was really studying. And then he gives me a link back to his grandfather. And in his diary, he talks about going to that cemetery graveyard and having the inscriptions chiseled out or recut. So you really get the fabric of this family moving across the landscape and being into each other up and down the generations. And I suppose what I should draw in is like these cards can give people a little sense of satisfaction. I mean, I could go, oh, Barbara, you stop me whenever you want to stop me going on looking at these things. But
I do. This has been fabulous, Simon. I do want to leave a little time during our hour to bring in questions, because I know I'm just bubbling up with them. This has been absolutely fabulous to show how there are the stories in each picture and how it still enthralls you, and you so project that energy and joy in discovering them, I'm sure, to the generations that follow. You have, I think, a few lessons learned from this experience you were about to go to. Go ahead and cover that.
I'll do that. And I hope you notice across there's a whole swathe of different types of things. You know, there are places that one there would actually be a newspaper article, a motorcycle magazine in 1911 that my great-grandfather wrote this article in about that funny little contraption we bought. You can get, you don't just have to put a person and their profile, you can bring in all sorts of dimensions. I didn't have that many lessons, but I would have made the QR codes a bit bolder. So I think you probably want to get a bit more contrast. I was trying to mute them out a bit, but I think I went a little too far, if I'm honest, because you do want them to stand out, and they will. My understanding is they will read quicker and more with more sureness if you get more contrast in the design. Mm-hmm. But that's one to play around with. The other, I mean, one suggestion is, I mean, it takes quite a long time to do 52 cards, and one option I thought could be just do the court cards. That would be an interesting halfway house compromise, and actually that might make them more playable in that the non-court cards would be less distracting. There's a balance there. Mm-hmm. And yeah, exactly. So I think those are my main lessons, or things that occurred to me. Yeah, more generally, I was just really pleased, and I had to finish with one last bit of what you call it, AI. So I had to put the snap on myself. I'm really not a master of AI, because like I said, 2 ghosts playing snap, one of them saying snap, and it just wouldn't do it. So I stopped at that. But one thing I've done is I bought so my parents for Christmas, I'm going to give them in this card box, and I hope I've got this in the camera right. Mm-hmm. And there are the two sets of cards in there. So they've got a nice bridge set, and then there's a nice touch. My grandmother, my lovely grandmother, who died in 2016, I was very, very close to. She was 98. She was a massive bridge player. In fact, so she was widowed for a long time and lived in, and I would go and stay with her for weekends and just play bridge with her and her friends. It was great. And she gave me this hand-typed bidding instructions. So I've made a copy of it, and I'm going to put that in the box with the cards, so that when my mother and my father, but when my mother, her daughter, is playing bridge with the cards with all the family links in it, she can also use her mother's bidding tips. And that is how we do that.
Oh, I love it. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. I knew there were some amazing stories, and what a wonderful way to tell a story. I think big round of applause from everyone here. Why don't we open it up for questions? Go ahead, and remember, I can't unmute you. You just have to hit that button on the far left to unmute.
Thanks, Matt. I can see Matt clapping away. Oh, Ruth, look. Who's your friend?
Go ahead, Liz.
Do I have to
Liz,
press? It says open queue.
You have to press unmute.
I used the wrong symbol. I meant to do a clap.
Okay. Cami, Maxon just asked a question in the chat there. What program you used to create the cards in?
Yeah, so that I was using this program called Pixelmator Pro. Pro as in I used it for so long on free, and I think you could use it the free version, but I've been using it for years, so I do pay for it now. But it's like a Photoshop, and I can show you.
We talked a little bit about this in terms of templates while you bring that up. I think one of the key principles here is you kind of can use anything. The trick, as Simon will show you, relates to getting the sizing right. And after this conversation, I know I want to create it myself. So I'm going to, be creating a template in Canva that anyone could use to do that. Go ahead.
So this is Pixelmator Pro. So each of those cards, let's take that one. I'll go copy. I'm going to open a new view from clipboard. Right, so that, and then you'll see that it's actually lots of bits. So I first of all started with let's have a look. All right, now you're asking basically. So there's hobbies, cooking, no cards. That's so cards, playing cards, ancestral cards, steps. Yeah, so if I went spades. Yeah, so here's the assembly part. Oh, I had that before, yeah. So first of all, I had to construct all of them. And that came from here. So like, yeah, here we go. One, it's ordered. Deck blanks. Yeah, so this is what I got from Shutterfly. And now that it's here, it's taking a bit to load. It's going to struggle a bit with Zoom. So I started with these guys, and then zoom in, but and I cut them out, or I copy that, start a new thing. Oh, it's tricking away. Right, so now I've got my blank. Then I defined a rectangle that for the center, and I made a rectangle that was I would stick in the middle, and then I would add in the image part and the text part. So yeah, here. So you can see the image is that top part, and then the bottom is a text box down there. And I just use those as blanks. I would then copy and start the next one. Copy and start the next one. I just used various pieces to make sure they were aligned. Like I would make like this, try this here. I'm using that to make sure that they all line up. So, and you know, I'm probably overly fussy on that, but I would just lots of little tricks to make sure everything was aligned properly. But fundamentally, I'm just building this layered image. I then had to find out what size to upload to fit the right spaces in the card thing. So if I go to the actual service itself, and I'll sign in. This is all making making things grind a bit, I'm afraid, but we'll get there. Now I'm signed in. I can go and look at old projects. Here's the one I did earlier, folks.
While you're looking at that, Simon, Becky asks, did you layer each part on the card? I assume that's in your Photoshop-like app.
Yeah, how do you mean? So you saw that I...
Becky, you can just come off mute. Go ahead.
Oh,
yeah, far away.
Mute. Mute.
I'm all in.
I can't unmute you.
So the back there is the image of the card. So you see there on the left where I'm. Oh yeah, far away.
So in my program, I can put like the photo on one layer. I can do the card numbers on one layer. I can do the QR code on a separate layer. Did you do it that way, or?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Okay,
totally.
Thanks.
Yeah, just layered them up, and the QR code obviously went last. And I put a little white rectangle around the QR code so that it would make a border into the card.
Okay.
That was a nice effect. And then so when you're making that, you drag your image onto one of these blanks, and of course you want the symbols there, the 2 and the spade, to be like they are, fitting perfectly. And I found it took quite a bit of trial and error before it fit, and that's what this rectangle is here. So that rectangle is the side I need to upload. So I would then take this, I just made a copy of it, and I would drop it into the middle here. Okay. Slight complication. My image, you can see, has little markings left over from the original image template I used with the card. So one final thing I had to do was to actually go in and just snip all those off. But oops, sorry. So I would cut those. Cut those away, and then I'd be left with this here, and that would be what I would upload. Oh, sorry, and then I would I would drag in the QR code, and we can go have a look at the QR code. So it's very simple. Pop a code. Here we go. I mean, the interface is incredibly simple. So here are all my QR codes I've done, but you literally just put like that. I've put in a URL. Then we've got lots of options. It saves some others that I've used in the past, but it will start by, these are just suggestions that it's made as your starting point. I think it's a good idea to put scan me on it, because that whole power of suggestion might not occur to people to do that. So I think I erred on the side of leaving that there. So you just choose one, let's say that one, and then you can play around with the colors, the shading, etc., and come up with something that you want. I think you can even put a logo in there if you wanted to attempt that. You can have different patterns, etc. So yeah, quite a bit of fun to be had on that. And then you generate it.
A quick question, Simon. How did you manage to make sure that the resolution of the QR code would be right on the card?
So
that it's readable by a camera, obviously.
I didn't actually. I probably should have done. I didn't print them off and test it. I just confine the screen on the card on the screen to the size it would actually be in real life, and then scanned it with my.
Yeah.
You might want to print some off and try it. That was a little bit reckless of me, maybe, to be honest.
It worked.
But they work. They do work. I mean, I think if they had more definition, they would work quicker. It does. You have to take. It doesn't get it immediately, but it's not bad. It's not difficult or anything. So I was lucky.
I like your solution of going all the way to the edges while it, you didn't know about that template. It didn't matter. I think the approach that you took ensured more, that you had that full real estate to work with.
Yeah. Exactly. So, and that's where I put the little board around it. That's created by a white rounded corner rectangle that's sitting behind the QR code. So lining all that up. I mean, that was a little bit fiddly too, but
yeah.
To be honest, the exactitude which I was measuring, no one's going to notice. It could even be more sort of quirky homespun if it wasn't. So.
Right. Well, that is kind of the point. It's like making a cake. You could go buy a cake, but when you make a cake at home, you're putting your love into it. And it's, the little quirkinesses don't give you that that sense of confidence for a home. You're a professional. You've had a lot of skill in a lot of these things, and so you know how to do that. But I think everyone should feel confident that it is the specialness with which they're putting it together that's important. And like that, I love that message that was left by your ancestor saying, so that some future descendant might read this. I mean, that's sort of the point, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, they'll be used. That's the thing. We play cards, right? So it's not, they won't be in a drawer. But I would like to make some for specific size of the family, so I can give them to cousins. So that means I've got to do it all again.
That's beautiful. Well, I think that's probably a good point to end the recording. You are all very welcome to stay for this after party, so that another half hour or so, no more than that, so that we can have some additional chat. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off the recording. Thank you again.